Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Happy Feet. Tonight, our speaker is Devika Jutagir. She is an assistant attending psychologist with the Department of Psychiatry and Behavioral Sciences at Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center. She provides psychological services to adults with cancer at Memorial Sloan Kettering's Counseling Center and the Ralph Lauren Center and conducts research to increase access to mental health care and medical care after a cancer diagnosis. So we welcome you, Dr. Devika, or I'm sorry, Dr. Jutagir, and take it away.
Thank you so much for the introduction, Jen. I know we've been in touch for something like 6 years now, and I really appreciate being invited to be part of the work that you're doing at Cancer Bridges. So, at Memorial Sloan Kettering, I provide psychotherapy to people who are diagnosed with cancer, and I also conduct research to improve the psychology services that we provide. And my understanding is that throughout the Happy Feet program, you've all been hearing a lot about the importance of physical activity, but you've also been talking about how it can actually be difficult to get going and to get that motor started. So this evening, I'm going to talk about a psychotherapy called behavioral activation that's designed to do just that, to help people get going, which can be especially hard at times when you're feeling down. And while behavioral activation is a well established treatment, for the past few years, I've been helping with a research study adapting it for use specifically for people with cancer. So this evening, I'm going to be sort of giving you an overview of behavioral activation, and I'll show you some examples of tools that we use that are part of behavioral activation. I do want to set some expectations first. Behavioral activation was originally designed as a treatment to be done one on one with a therapist over the course of 5 to 10 meetings. And that's so people can have some guidance while personalizing and practicing these tools. It can take some trial and error to feel the full benefit. And so I just start with this caveat so that you won't feel discouraged that behavioral activation wouldn't be helpful for you if you don't feel the benefits just after hearing this talk. But I'm hoping that some aspects of this talk will resonate with you or perhaps inspire you with some ideas. I have nothing to disclose except that I do want to give credit to Dr. Rebecca Saraceno, a close colleague of mine who received funding from the National Cancer Institute to research use of behavioral activation in the context of cancer specifically. So if you take one thing away from this talk, I hope it will be the main principle behind behavioral activation. We tend to think that we need to wait until we feel motivated or feel ready and then get going. But research actually tells us that if you get going first, the motivation will follow. In other words, don't wait to feel ready, just start. I know this may sound counterintuitive. So the rest of my talk this evening is going to be about the rationale behind this recommendation and how to actually do it. Behavioral activation is a widely used, straightforward, accessible treatment used to encourage activity. It helps you make a plan to act, to help you get going when you don't feel ready or motivated. So, as you already know, cancer and treatment can result in changes to several areas of your life. Changes in your physical ability. You might feel low energy, you might feel weakness, you might feel nausea, you might have experienced weight loss or weight gain. You may be taking more medications with side effects that lead to other symptoms. You may experience changes to your self identity. You now find yourself viewed as a patient. You're unable to do more activities. And you may find that knowledge that you've developed over a lifetime feel unseen. You may have experienced changes in your relationships. I think you talked about that a few sessions ago with Kim. You might find that others don't know what to say or what to do after they find that you have cancer. You may find that you're too tired or too sick to meet up with others the way that you used to. And so you might be more isolated. And you may have experienced changes in your level of independence. You may now need help getting to appointments. You might need help with meals and taking care of your home. You might be worrying about becoming more dependent, and you might be worrying about paying for treatment. Any of these changes or all of them together can leave you feeling down, which can leave you feeling lacking in motivation. So, as I said, behavioral activation is a treatment to help you get going when you feel down. And it's based on the cognitive behavioral theory of emotions. And I think in past iterations of Happy Feet, in some of the talks on stress reduction, they've talked about the cognitive behavioral theory of emotions. So I'll talk about it a bit here, but that's another resource if you want to learn more about it. So when we think about feeling down, we tend to focus on how we feel: sad, down, depressed, unmotivated. But you may also have noticed that when you feel down, your thoughts change. You might have more negative thoughts about yourself. You might have thoughts like, I'm a burden on my family. You may also notice that when you feel down, you act differently. You might stay in bed more. You might isolate yourself more. Feeling down is more than just feelings. The cognitive behavioral model says of emotion says that feelings don't just come out of nowhere. Instead, they're associated with thoughts that we might be aware of or that might be outside of your awareness. And they're also related to how we behave. Changes in any of these three pillars, your thoughts, your feelings, and your behaviors, have ripple effects on any of the other pillars. So, for example, having depressed thoughts, like I'm a burden to my family, could lead to depressed behaviors like isolating yourself more, which could lead to feelings of loneliness or despair or depression. So, that's a good example of how your behavior can have an impact on how you feel. If you're isolating yourself and staying in bed, you're going to feel more down, more stuck, more lonely, more depressed, more unmotivated. It therefore follows that doing activities you enjoy could then help you feel better. Do you ever notice that your mood improves after you exercise? That's because being active changes your brain chemistry, which in turn changes how you feel. Many studies have shown that changing behavior alone has a powerful impact on depressive symptoms. So, through the techniques I'm going to be talking about this evening that are part of behavioral activation, we focus on changing your behavior. The behavior is changed first, and then thoughts and feelings follow. We believe that as you increase your healthy behaviors and you decrease unhealthy or depressed behaviors, you start to accumulate more positive experiences, which result in improved mood and thinking. A really basic principle of behavioral activation is that it's hard to feel depressed when you're doing something that you enjoy. So, for an example of how behavioral activation works, if you're having cancer treatment and you feel depressed, like you're not leaving the house and you're avoiding social interactions, we would work with you to substitute some of your naps with positive, healthy social experiences, like calling a friend, taking a walk with a friend, or eating a meal with someone you love. And the idea is that over time, these positive experiences will result in improved mood and thinking and less isolating behavior throughout the day. So, being active can help you feel better. But how do you actually get going? And how do you actually start being active if you're not feeling motivated? Okay, that's where making a plan comes in. So I'm now going to shift gears to talking about the steps to making that plan. The first step is to identify your values, what's important to you. It's so easy to lose touch with your values after the changes that come from being diagnosed with cancer and going through treatment. But it's really important to reflect on your values because these are the source of your motivation and what you enjoy doing. So, one of the first activities that I encourage is making a values list based on different areas of your life. So, values come from areas of your life, including family relationships, social relationships, intimate relationships, physical well being, mental or emotional health, being part of a community, spirituality, your hobbies and recreations, education or training, employment or your career. And it's really important to think about listing values from across these different content areas so that not everything hangs on one value or one area of your life. So, for example, if your only value is your career, and then after cancer treatment, you can no longer work, that's going to pose problems for how you feel. It's important to think about and cultivate other areas of your life that you value. The other thing I'll say is that it's important to identify your actual values. Sometimes we think we're living a life that's consistent with our values, but we're not. And that's going to lead to continual disappointments. So I encourage you to really take some time to explore your values. Your values are not specific things to achieve. I'm going to give you a question and let's take a minute to think about it now. This is a question that's intended to help you identify your values. Take a minute and imagine you're writing your autobiography. Imagine how you would like to live your life, barring all barriers in the best case scenario. What are the things that are most important to you in this scenario? What would you stand for and how would you spend your time? I'll give you a few seconds to think about that. Just think about all these different areas of your life and how they fit with your responses to that question. You may have an idea about what some of your values are, although it can sometimes be a longer process of exploration. It's an important one since your values guide the goals that you set for yourself. So, for example, if physical well-being came to mind as an important value to you, you may prioritize fitting exercise into your day. Or, for example, someone who values social relationships might state that a goal of theirs is to be a good friend. So, once you've made a values list, through behavioral activation, the next step is to brainstorm activities you enjoy that are consistent with these values and with your goals. These are activities that you enjoy that also bring you a sense of accomplishment. And one really important thing here is I'm not talking about things you should do. I'm talking about things that you actually enjoy doing, things that make you feel confident about yourself. And these activities should be observable and measurable. So, being a good friend is a goal, but it's not an observable, measurable activity. An activity would be something specific, like having dinner with a friend. And behavioral activation manuals have a life activities checklist, which has almost 200 activities on it. So you might think of some activities yourself, or it might be helpful to look at a list like this to pick some activities that are important to you and enjoyable and that align with some of the values that we thought about. When you're choosing your activities, it's important to think about a range of difficulty levels, also to think about the short term and the long term. And this is to ensure that you can actually reasonably achieve your activity goals. So if your goal is to develop an exercise routine, we might help you break this down into smaller steps, like first call the gym and find out about their programming, or buy a pair of sneakers that you need. This is going to help you feel a sense of accomplishment as you check off some of these easier activities rather than disappointing yourself with an overly ambitious goal that you don't achieve. And this sense of accomplishment will help you as you move towards your goal. If you're struggling to find a valued direction, like you're not exactly sure what your values are, especially if things have changed for you, commit to experimenting with some of the values on the values list by using some of these activities. Take a week, choose a value, and plan to notice your reactions to making the effort to hold on to that value. Make a list of some activities that might fit with the value and choose one activity to try that feels easy. Notice your thoughts when you choose this activity. Make a plan to try to do that activity. Just do the activity. You don't have to tell anybody about it. Just see what happens. Commit to following through with doing this activity once a day for a week, for example. Keep a diary of your reactions to doing this activity and others' reactions to you as you're doing it. And then at the end of the week, reflect on your experiment. Maybe even process it with someone else. Could be someone that you feel comfortable talking to, or maybe a therapist. This can help you try to use these different behaviors to try to identify what your values might be. Okay, so once you have your activity list, you can try to select 15 activities, say, from your list and rank them from easiest to hardest. And remember, I'm suggesting starting with something easy so that you can pick something that you're likely to be able to achieve that will help you develop a sense of accomplishment and start to feel more confident about your ability to achieve your goals. So pick the activities, rank them from easiest to hardest, and now it's time to actually start engaging in these new activities. The manual, which I'll give you access to, uses an activity planning worksheet like this. And the idea is to pick 2 or 3 of the easiest activities, and then schedule them, and then track whether you completed the activity. So I imagine this might not be the first time you've been recommended to try to schedule activities to make them happen. There are 2 things that make what I'm suggesting today a little bit different. The first is I'm talking about scheduling activities that you enjoy doing, not activities that you should do, but activities that you actually enjoy doing. And the second is that I'm going to advise that you track your mood when you do the activity. So on a scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being the most positive, track what your mood is after doing it, during or after you did the activity. If you do this over time, you'll start to see how your mood tracks with what you're doing. You'll notice patterns and you'll learn more about about what you really enjoy. You might find that there are some things you don't enjoy as much as you thought, and there are things that you enjoy more than you thought you do. And over time, with practice doing this, you'll start to layer in more challenging activities to continue to cultivate confidence in your ability to achieve your goals and a sense of achievement and control over your mood and your well-being. Okay, so now you have a plan. When the moment comes in your schedule to actually get started, here are some tips for getting unstuck to carry out that plan, to get that motor going, and for increasing chances that your plan will be successful. And when I finish talking and we get to the discussion, I'm going to be curious to hear if any of you have tried any of these tips and found them to be helpful, or if any of them sound like something that you'd be interested in trying. So here's one tip that I alluded to before that can be really helpful. Well, keep it simple. Pick the easiest thing. Another tip that I think is really helpful is breaking things down into smaller pieces. Like I said earlier, if your plan is to go to the gym, a smaller piece of that might be first getting the new sneakers that you need. Or here's a really common scenario. Imagine a day when getting out of bed feels really hard. What's the smallest doable step to get you started? Is it just pushing the blanket off of you, rolling over, sitting up? Once you take that first small step, you might find that the rest follow. Maybe the idea of getting out of bed feels hard, but taking that first step of pushing off the blanket feels doable. And then the rest follows. Do one thing at a time. Set realistic goals for yourself, especially when you're starting out. Not fulfilling a goal that was unrealistic will be discouraging. So start small. Schedule activities at times when you think you're most likely to succeed, not when you think you should do them. So if you know you don't feel good in the morning, schedule the activity for the afternoon. The idea is that we want to have early successes here so that you build a sense of mastery. So go with what seems most feasible based on your actual day-to-day experience. Be compassionate with yourself. Um, you might find that sometimes the plan doesn't go as you imagined, and that's okay. It doesn't mean that you won't have future successes. Anticipate potential setbacks and plan around them. Don't be discouraged that these setbacks happen. A setback does not mean that you won't be successful in the future. A setback is something to learn from. Another tip here is that when you do something healthy, make sure you reward yourself from it. If you enjoy that reward, it's going to enhance the enjoyment that you feel from doing the activity, and that's just going to help reinforce continuing to do the activity that you enjoy. After the plan, after carrying out your plan or not carrying out your plan, reflect on it. What worked? What didn't work? Why did it work or why didn't it work? What might need to be modified? This is going to help increase your successes and sense of accomplishment in the future. Think about changing your environment. Put on music that energizes you. Go to an area of the house that feels less cluttered. I think in some iterations of Happy Feet, they've talked about the environment. So that's a resource for you to consult on this. There are lots of ways to change your environment. One might be move your things around to reduce the friction to taking those first easy steps to getting going. Put your sneakers in a place that's easy to reach, for example, if you're thinking about physical activity as a goal. Minimize distractions around you that are going to get in the way of starting your plan and carrying out your plan. Use visuals to remind you. Some of you may already use strategies like putting post-its places to remind you to do things. You can do that to try to increase your motivation and cue you to do things you want to do. Try talking yourself into it. This is where that mood tracker that I talked about comes in. Sometimes when we're feeling down, we have these thoughts, whether we notice them or not, that we're not actually going to enjoy the activity. That mood tracker can help remind yourself that you actually do like something. That's actually data about yourself, that you felt good while you were doing something. If you remind yourself of that, it can help challenge some of those negative thoughts in your mind that you're not going to enjoy doing something. Another tip that can be helpful is using a timer. So, for example, if you're planning to exercise for 30 minutes, That could feel daunting, especially when you're first starting out. So tell yourself that you only have to do it for 5 minutes and set the timer for 5 minutes. 5 minutes might feel less overwhelming. Once the timer goes off at 5 minutes, you might find that you have established momentum to keep yourself exercising for longer. Another tip is to use reminders or alarms to cue yourself to get going. You may already use your phone alarm, for example, to remind you to take medications. You can set alarms to cue you to get going on aspects of your plan. Another tip that I think is really helpful is to have an accountability partner. This could be someone who wants to do the activity with you, or just someone who's aware of your goal who can check in with you later about whether you did it, or maybe process with you whether you actually did it or not. Focus on some of the long-term benefits of the activity. That can be very motivating, especially if they're aligned with your values that you've established for yourself. And then commit to making decisions based on what you know, not based on how you feel in the moment. Remember, the point is not to wait until you feel ready to get going. Focus on how you know you're going to enjoy this, maybe because of data from your mood tracker, even if you don't feel ready. And this may help you just get going and just do it. So I talked a little bit about having an accountability partner, and I'm going to go on a brief tangent just to talk about how to find who that person might be. I know you had a talk recently with Kim that had to do with building friendships and building up your support network. And I just want to reinforce that a little bit and kind of bring it into this conversation about having the accountability partner. So you might already be familiar, but just to remind you, there are several different types of support or help that we get from other people. One of them is informational support. That's advice or information from other people. For example, information about the type of cancer you have, information about the treatment that you're going to be undergoing. Another type of support is emotional support. You can think of that as comfort. And an example of that is being listened to by someone. Esteem support is being encouraged. And an example of that is someone in your life who tends to cheerlead you. And then the fourth type is instrumental support or tangible support. It's defined as sort of tangible help that you can get from someone. So examples of this are getting a ride from someone to an appointment, getting someone to help you with chores, or someone to make you a meal, or maybe someone to go on a walk with you or be an accountability partner. And then think about who can help you. So think about that network of people that you've been working on building. Cast a wide net. This could include a partner, a child, another family member, a friend, a coworker, a clergy member, a medical team member, or a neighbor. And now think about matching the type of support you need to who can provide it. And this is really important because we often experience frustration when there's a mismatch. So some of you may have had the experience, for example, that you tell someone that you had a diagnosis of cancer and they start to give you advice about it. They tell you they know someone who tried this treatment that doesn't apply to you at all. There's a mismatch. You tried to tell this friend about your diagnosis. Maybe you were looking for emotional support, and instead they started to give you informational support. That's going to be frustrating. Try to think about what you need and who can help you with that particular need. So, for an example, for an accountability partner, maybe it would be helpful to have somebody who's encouraging you about your goal and cheerleading you. And maybe you can think of a family member who tends to be a cheerleader for you, who'd be a good person, or who you know would be receptive if you told them, that you just need someone to cheer you on and be supportive, and that person could do that. Or for another example, for an accountability partner, maybe you want someone to actually do the activity for you. So if you're looking to become more physically active, maybe you want someone to go on a walk with you, and maybe your neighbor would be a good person to do that for you. Okay, so at the beginning of the talk, I said if there's one takeaway, it's this: don't wait to feel ready. Make a plan, get going, and the motivation will follow. One thing that I just want to caution is, of course, pace yourself. I imagine that you're already thinking about that when you're thinking about increasing your level of physical activity. But it's really important because, like we said, overdoing it can lead to setbacks, which can be discouraging. I'm suggesting starting with something that's easy and building up a sense of accomplishment and going from there. So, starting with something easy and building up is part of pacing yourself. And of course, talk to your doctor about what physical activity is appropriate for you and where you might want to start, to make sure that you'll be successful. So, to summarize, I've talked about the cognitive behavioral model of emotions on which behavioral activation is based. I talked about starting by creating a values list. And I think in the coming weeks, you're going to hear more about finding meaning and perhaps the topic of values from my colleague, Addison Monroe. I talked about using the values list to set goals for yourself and then identifying activities you enjoy that contribute to those goals. I talked about making a plan by identifying the easiest activities, by scheduling them, and by tracking your mood while you're doing them. And I talked about finding accountability partners to help you by matching the people in your life to people who can provide you with the tangible help or encouragement that you need. And I reminded you to pace yourself. And I talked a lot about other strategies to become unstuck and to get going. And I hope that this provides some inspiration for you about how to get that motor going, especially at times when you're feeling down. If you're curious to learn more about behavioral activation, as I said, it's a very widely used treatment. So there's a lot of information available about this online. And I'm going to share these links with Jen so that she can distribute them to you. The first resource is just more information and background about behavioral activation for depression from the American Psychological Association. And the second resource is a workbook that you can use. And if you take a look at it, you'll recognize a lot of the images from my talk today. It contains user-friendly versions of all of the tools that I talked about today, and even more tools. It really helps break down each step of this process, and it provides worksheets that you can print off for yourself to schedule activities and think about goal setting in light of your values and things like that. And it talks about a lot of the tips that I talked about, and it gives a lot of very useful examples. I also talked today about how behavioral activation is traditionally a 5 to 10 session intervention that's done with a therapist. If this talk piqued your interest on really trying behavioral activation, you might want to try looking for a therapist who can work on it with you. So, one way to do that is to look on the website Psychology Today, which is a huge database of therapists across the US. And you can search for therapists who are licensed in Pennsylvania, who have expertise in cognitive behavioral therapy, since therapists who have experience in cognitive behavioral therapy should be familiar with behavioral activation. And then you can even filter those therapists by who has experience with cancer or chronic illness. So, thank you so much for having me to speak today. I'm going to stop here so that we have plenty of time to talk about your questions and any reactions that you have, since I think talking about these tools and exercises um, is what's most helpful in terms of actually putting them into practice. So I'm happy to clarify anything, and I'd really like to hear about whether any of you have tried any of these tools and have had any success with them, or whether there are any that you'd like to try.